LeBron James all the way in.
Just that kind of same intrigue.
But I'm just saying, I don't see how that what that does to debate why there would be seeding or not. You know, you're gonna get small markets, doesn't matter. You know, you don't know who's gonna make the finals any given year. So regardless if there's conferences or 1 through 16 seeding, and it might entice teams, say, bottom half of the Western Conference, right? Let's just keep going with Denver, right?
Right.
Very talented team. Let's say they come up against a team like Cleveland to start. People have Cleveland as their favorite to make it out of the Eastern Conference still now.
Right.
But Denver could be like, who cares if they're the top of the Eastern Conference? We're better than they are, you know?
Okay.
And then you see a team like Denver just step it up to the next level and knock Cleveland out of the playoffs. That's an incredible moment. And that doesn't necessarily mean that Denver is going to move on to the championships, you know, or the finals.
Right.
But it just creates competitive nature where the bottom half of the playoffs usually don't matter. You know, like think of last year's playoffs. Cleveland, literally, LeBron single-handedly ran through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs.
Right.
Because those teams didn't matter. And they knew they weren't going to win. But let's say he was coming up against a team like Denver or even Portland. They're not just going to hand him the first round of the playoffs. They're going to work their ass off to try and knock him out of the playoffs. And that's not saying that a team in the first round of the Eastern Conference playoffs isn't going to do that either. But they've also played LeBron in the Cleveland Cavaliers more often than the Western Conference.
I don't know. To me, I mean, I'm just going to have to disagree. But, you know, it is what it is. I just think that, you know, small market, whether you're big or small, I mean, if small market goes against small market, you might as well just keep it the same way. I don't know. I don't think that there's any change that you need to do right now. I think this change is really just because in case LeBron does go to LA, it does create some intriguing matchups. So that way LeBron doesn't get an easy path to the finals.
In the Western Conference?
So, like, let's say LeBron just goes through the Western... If he goes to LA, goes through the Western Conference, just beats everybody, it's a cakewalk for the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah. I mean, you keep bringing up small market, and I honestly don't really care about small market versus big market. And I understand that from a business perspective, the NBA has to look into that, right?
Yeah.
But just let's go back to the actual big basketball tournament that uses seeding, the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
The entire world, like the entire USA, is fixated with March Madness.
Right.
And usually they pick some small team to want to root for.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where Butler... I don't even know what state Butler is in. What state is Butler in?
I think it's Indiana.
I have no idea, but I watched them in the Final Four 2 years in a row, and I was rooting for them 2 years in a row to win the championship. I had no idea what city they were in, what state they were from, and I know that I was not the only person. It's just like, think of Florida Gulf Coast or whatever, 5 years ago. People don't know where that school is. People didn't know any of the players' names, and they were still rooting for them. It's the same thing as this. You see a team like... Let's keep going with Denver, right? Some people on the East Coast have never watched Denver play this year.
Right.
But they come up against Cleveland in the first round, and they're like, wow, Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, those guys are talented. And they beat Cleveland. They're like, wow, that team is for real. And then they're like, oh, all right, I'm going to root for Denver. You know, my team didn't even make the playoffs. I don't know. I think it breeds competitive nature. And I'm not debating whether or not you're right or wrong. This is kind of up for your personal taste on how you like the playoffs and how you like NBA.
Yeah.
I just think that this would foster more competitive nature between all teams, not just East and West Coast.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Because imagine a team in the East Coast is like, oh, wow, we don't have to go up against LeBron in the first round of the playoffs every year. We're going to actually try, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or a team in the West Coast is like, oh, we don't have to play Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Kevin Durant this year. All right, maybe we can actually win a couple rounds in the playoffs, you know?
Yeah.
You just never know.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I'll say about this, and it just goes back to the original just air travel stuff. I don't think that... I mean, maybe if you host it like an NCAA tournament style where it's like just in one arena. But then, to me, it just feels too much like college basketball than it would NBA. Because
what's necessarily wrong with that? In some facets, like, people enjoy the March Madness process more than they do the NBA playoffs process.
To me, then it's just like, why even fight for a number 1 seed then?
Well,
I mean, I understand you want to play the worst team. Like
some people don't care in general now. Think of LeBron and the Cavs last year. They didn't care what seed they were. They put no effort in the last 10 games of the season because the first seed doesn't matter even in our current standpoint.
Yeah, but I mean, like, for that, though, it's like Curry and LeBron don't care, but the other teams do, like Toronto. Because then you get a favorable matchup against whatever the worst team in the NBA is. Compared to, like, a LeBron or Curry or, like, the Warriors. They don't care what seed they get.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have the best players in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter. But for, like, Toronto, in order to get to that game, it's better to face these lower-ranked teams than it would be to face the higher-ranked teams.
Yeah, no, I agree. But keep in mind this, too, right? Like, let's say Toronto is undisputed number 1 seed this season. We have the 1 through 16 seeding. What do they need a home court advantage for against the 16th seed in the tournament? You know, it wouldn't matter. But what would matter is, let's say in the semi-final round of the playoffs, they're up against Houston. And let's say, just for the sake of this discussion, they do have a better record than Houston. Right. They would get home court advantage because now the travel doesn't matter as much. Because then it really would go back to a similar playoff format where you do 2 games and then 2 games and then 2 games.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really do I think that I think teams would try more, you know? It would also create a viewpoint from the average viewer, right? Just think of the playoffs last year too, right? I'm going to keep using the playoffs last year because everyone knew who was making the finals.
Right.
It was Cleveland and Golden State. But when you watch this, it's not like, oh, the first 2 rounds of the playoffs don't matter at all anymore. People can actually watch this and say, wow, Portland actually just beat one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference.
Right.
I don't know. I think there's just more storylines to be told when this would happen.
I mean, there would be more storylines, but the numbers were up for the NBA.
Well, that's just the NBA in general is going up. You know?
Yeah, but I mean, like, it just went dramatically up when it was the Warriors v. Cavs for the 3rd time. So I think having that kind of storyline of the top 2 dogs, because that's really what's going to make your money. I mean, these other small markets, they're going to do their jobs.
Not forever, though. It's not going to happen forever. People are, I think, Warrior fever is, you know, I mean, look at the Warrior team in general. You know, they're kind of tired, you know?
Right.
And I think that you can see the same thing in their fans right now, you know? It's been this whole season. It's like they've made the finals uncontested 3 years in a row.
Right.
Because they have the same exact competition 3 years in a row. But if they have different competition, let's say they come up against Toronto in round 2 or round 3, that could be a lot more interesting than them coming up against San Antonio for the 3rd year in a row. Or OKC, who knows? It is what it is, though. I mean, it's just, I appreciate the fact that Adam Silver is at least talking about this.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Whether or not anything comes of it, it is what it is. But I like the idea, and I like the fact that they're talking about things like this.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's good that they're talking about this. Like I talked about in my NBA over NFL video, the fact that they're going to start using Twitch and all that stuff. I like how forward-thinking Adam Silver is. I just think sometimes we do a little bit too much sometimes in sports.
Mm-hmm.
Where we kind of overdo things, or we kind of do stuff that we don't really necessarily need to change, but I appreciate the thought of it because it brings question, brings intrigue to how we can improve rules for not only the players but for the league itself.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think at the last point I want to talk about on this too is going back to the fact that they can reduce regular season games
and
expand the playoffs. I think players would be much more engaged.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be more prepared to say, like, because the regular season everyone knows doesn't matter really. Mm-hmm. For a team like the Warriors or Houston, it just doesn't matter that much. But let's say the regular season is reduced to like 68 games, I think is what I've heard. Sometimes people say 68, and then you expand the playoffs by a couple teams in it. There's more playoff games in that facet. people just care more in the playoffs to play their hardest.
Right.
The game gets better for a more extended amount of time because the games matter more.
Yeah.
Who knows, though? Whatever they're doing, I appreciate it. I appreciate thought, effort.
Ready to move on?
Let's move on.